What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be going through my 2026 season preview for the Arizona Cardinals. Basically, how I'm going to go through this is take a look at last year for both the offense and defense, and then look at how this team changed in both of those respects, whether it was additions or losses for the team, and then kind of give a quick preview of the schedule and how I feel that the Cardinals and other teams that I'm going to talk about fare in their schedule. If you want to see me do a video about your favorite team in this sort of format, make sure you leave a like, make sure you subscribe, and the plan is to have a video for every one of the 32 teams out before the season starts. Starting with the offense in 2025, it was a very pass-heavy offense. Jacoby Brissett was 13th in pass attempts, and I think that number is a little bit disregarded because he's not, top 5 or top 3. But this is interesting given the fact that he started only 12 games. Every other quarterback that's ahead of him, other than Patrick Mahomes, had at least 16 starts. So you consider that fact and wonder if Jacoby Brissett was the week 1 starter for this team, just how high up he would be in terms of pass attempts. Trey McBride, first among tight ends in terms of targets. Michael Wilson was top 10 among receivers in targets. And this also kind of leads to the fact that this was one of the worst teams running the ball in the NFL last year. The leading rusher, Michael Carter, had less rushing yards than the 12 quarterbacks I have listed below him. Some of the names make sense: Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, but some other names like, Drake May, Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield, Trevor Lawrence. You would hope that a guy leading your team in rushing was higher in rushing yards than those 12 quarterbacks, but that just kind of goes to show where this team was last year in the running game. And I think this team did make some pretty big attempts at improving the running game, both with a running back in Jeremiah Love in the first round and some offensive linemen like Isaac Seumalo, who comes over from Pittsburgh, as well as Chase Basantis, who they drafted in the second round as well. This team also made some other interesting additions like Tyler Algier from Atlanta. Kendrick Bourne comes over to this team on a 2-year deal. And this team also drafted Carson Beck, who I'll end up talking about later. But it's an interesting addition in the third round. A quarterback out of Miami who, for the past 3 years, really has been in the spotlight a lot in college football. He's played a lot of football. He's started a lot of games. He's started a lot of big games in the SEC and in the college football playoff as well. And this is a guy who was really a winning quarterback the last couple of years in college football. So it'll be interesting to see, like I said, when I get later on in the video, it'll be interesting to see if he's a guy that plays this year or in the future at all for Arizona. Getting to the offseason losses for this offense, it's really highlighted by quarterback Kyler Murray, who signed that 1-year deal with the Minnesota Vikings. They also lost guys like Evan Brown to the Houston Texans and wide receiver Greg Dortch. They also did end up losing their number 1 rusher from last year, Michael Carter, on a 1-year deal to Tennessee. Now, to me, I think there's 3 key storylines for the Arizona Cardinals offense. The first one is going to be, what is Marvin Harrison Jr. in year 3? Is he a guy that's a number 2 receiver and a really good one? Or is he a guy that's kind of like the last couple of seasons, a guy who isn't very reliable, not just in the passing game, but in a game-to-game status of whether or not he's going to be playing? He's had injuries these last couple of seasons. He's had poor play. He's just not been the guy you would think of as a number 4 overall pick from just a short time ago. The second question I have is, what are the chances that Carson Beck plays? And it really feeds into the third question of whether or not they could be tanking by November. I think those 2 questions kind of go hand in hand, because if the answer to number 3 is yes, I think the answer to number 2 is that Carson Beck's going to play at some point in 2026. Looking at the defense in 2025, this really was sort of the reason that this team, the last 9 weeks of the season, was really poor. This was the side of the ball that I think lost them a majority of their games down the stretch. And, it's not really surprising, I guess, either, because this wasn't a defense that was just layered with stars at every position. You have your few players that I highlighted here, like Josh Sweat, Denzel Burke, and Buda Baker. But this was really it. Calais Campbell didn't have a great season. Their first round picks from the last 2 years in Walter Nolan and Darius Robinson, they provided little to no production last year. And just in general, this defense did not perform very well. And I wouldn't necessarily say that this team made huge improvements on defense through the offseason. You have a couple of guys like Roy Lopez and Jack Gibbons who you signed to 2-year deals in free agency. They come over as potential starters and possible guys that you're going to, kind of key your defense around. You also draft a Southeast Louisiana defensive lineman, Caleb Proctor, in the 4th round, a guy who possibly is a rotational edge rusher and defensive lineman for your team going forward. I would say that the losses probably outweigh the gains in the offseason for this defense. 3 definite starters for this defense a year ago: Jalen Thompson, Dalvin Tomlinson, and Calais Campbell. All 3 of these teams go away from the Cardinals. And, Jalen Thompson got the big contract, but both Calais Campbell and Dalvin Tomlinson were, although this defense was bad last year, they were key players. They were guys that made them better, and now they're gone. My 3 key storylines for the Arizona Cardinals defense in 2026. The first one is that the past 2 first-round picks need to produce. Walter Nolan and Darius Robinson, they really have done nothing. Walter Nolan last year, I think, had a very injury-riddled season, and Darius Robinson just didn't provide much on that side of the ball. So considering that they're first-round picks, considering that they're kind of the building blocks for this team and this defense going forward, they need to show something. The second storyline is this is year 4 of defensive coordinator Nick Rawles's defense. You kind of wonder, they've had more seasons finishing in the bottom 3 in terms of total defense than they have even finishing in the top half of the league in total defense. So you kind of wonder if this is the last season that we're going to see of this defense, if they don't improve, if they don't show some production. You kind of wonder what his spot on the team going forward is as a coach. The third thing I want to bring up is, what are the chances of a Buda Baker trade? I think over the last few seasons, we've heard rumblings of it, but it always ends up diminishing into he just wants to be a Cardinal for life. And I just don't know if we're going to get that same outcome again. Again, if this team is struggling, if they're looking like defensively they're going to move on from Nick Rawles, I could definitely see Buda Baker trying to get out of Arizona and play for an actual contender. Looking at the schedule for the Arizona Cardinals in 2026, you have a very tough start to the season in the first half of the year. You go to the LA Chargers, to San Francisco, to LA to face the Rams, and then finish it up with away games in Dallas and Seattle that first half of the season. And your home games aren't cakewalks either. You have the Seahawks, Lions, and Broncos at home as well. This is just a tough looking schedule all around, whether you're looking at the away games, the home games. They don't have a bye week until week 14, which I always think is a tough outcome for a team to not have that week off until the last month of the season. And just in general, this is a tough way for a team that's young, for a team that's looking to improve. They're probably going to see a lot of losses early, and I think that kind of feeds into my questions about the offense and the defense. What are the chances that Carson Beck plays in 2026? What are the chances that Buda Baker by week 8 is looking to get traded? I just think in general, this is going to lead the Cardinals to making some moves during the season, whether it's getting guys off of the team, whether it's putting guys in starting positions that weren't in that spot to begin the year. And we'll just have to see. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but this to me feels like a schedule where Arizona's going to struggle through a majority of. To me, I think the floor for this team is 2-15. They're probably the bottom feeder in a stacked NFC West and really a stacked NFC in general. I think they are probably the least talented team in the NFC. Um, but with that being said, this could be a team where late in the year they win a few games, they knock off the Jets or the Raiders or the Saints, and they possibly win a couple of games within the division as well to kind of make them one of those teams like the Saints last year, or one of those teams that looks like they could be possibly making a late playoff push, but really are just looking like a team that's finishing the year strong. They have a lot of young stars on the offense with you have Jeremiah Love, who you drafted. You have Marvin Harrison. You have Michael Wilson. You have Trey McBride. You still have guys like Trey Benson on this team. So, I could see offensively this team winning themselves a few games here or there. But still, I don't see enough defensively that makes me think that they are capable of getting to double-digit wins or possibly making a wild card run. I really just don't see that for this team. With that being said, that's going to be the video. If you disagree or agree with what I've said about the Cardinals here today, make sure you leave a comment down below. Make sure you like and subscribe to see future videos about your favorite team or whatever other team you want to hear me talk about. And I'll see you in the next video.